All right. Hey, everyone. It's good to see you. So we're here for 7 Steps to Awakening and Out of the Stillness. And I don't have anything to say in introduction, so I think we'll just jump right in. How's that sound? So we're starting with 292 in the 7 Steps to Awakening. And this is what 292 says. Truth is permanent. The real is changeless. What changes is not real. What is real does not change. When I consciously started my spiritual path, the first curriculum that I dove into was A Course in Miracles. And of course, A Course in Miracles talked about how the world is not real. It even said the world does not exist, and that is the central message that this course intends to teach, right? But as you can imagine, I struggled with that. Like, what the heck? And, this feels awful damn real, right? So what does that mean? And I always think I was fortunate when I was studying the course because I was by myself. I didn't at that time, when I first started, I didn't know about course teachers. I didn't know about course groups. ACIM Gather was out there, but I didn't know about it yet. So I was all by myself. And the reason that was an advantage is because the only place that an answer could come from was within. And those are the good answers. You ask another person, it's possible you're going to get an ignorant answer. For instance, one answer I've heard many times people give is, even though the course is very clear, the world does not exist. This is the central message this course, intends to teach. I've heard a number of people say, well, that part's not true. Like that, it doesn't really mean that. So when I went within, and I asked, what does this mean? That the world is not real. The answer that I got was that in order for something to qualify as real, it has to have no beginning, no end, and be absolutely changeless. That's the answer I got from within. Later, when I asked, what does it mean that the world does not exist? The answer I got about that was, in order to exist, it has to exist on its own power, which means it doesn't depend on something else. And I was taught how the world depends on the mind for its existence. I was taught that through the scribing of NTI Ephesians, and later the scribing of the code. So it's taught that the world does not exist. It appears, no doubt. It is experienced, no doubt. But that is not the same as real, and that is not the same as exists. So there's still a little part of me that, really loves when I read from somebody like Nisargadatta, the exact same definition that I received from within. And I think this is because what that shows is that knowledge within is true. Right? Otherwise, Nisargadatta might have a different definition of real, right? So that withinness is true. And to this day, I still get a thrill at confirmations of anything that I learned from within, not from a book, but from within. So as a result, 292 is a lot of fun for me. Again, Nisargadatta says, truth is permanent. The real is changeless. What changes is not real. What is real does not change. And if you just never question that definition, just accept it as true, it's incredibly easy to tell the difference between what's real and what's not real. Like the question, is the body real? Well, does it change? Clearly it does, right? Clearly it does. So it doesn't meet the definition of real. Is the mind real? Well, does it change? Clearly it does, right? So it just makes it so easy to tell the difference between truth and untruth. You know, some of the things that some spiritual students get confused on are what I call truth stories. I mean, you know, they're accredited to truth, but they're still stories. For example, reincarnation. So if you have a soul that's living this lifetime and then it dies and it's born into another lifetime, would you call that a change? That means it's not truth. You see? So if you stick to this definition of truth, you stick to this definition of real, you won't ever be confused again. You know, you only get confused when you forget and you think certain things can be spiritual, and the word to use spiritual means true, right? Certain things can be spiritual, like reincarnation, like let's take another one, miraculous healings. Let's take another one, near-death experiences. Let's take another one, spirits like ghosts. Let's take another one, visions. Let's take another one, spiritual experiences that come and go. I mean, you know, it's so easy to get confused until you apply this test. When you apply this test, you realize there's a whole lot more illusion than you thought, because a lot of this stuff that you thought was truth turns out to meet the definition of, well, listen to what he says, what changes is not real. That's pretty clear. What changes is not real. And then, of course, you know, if you aren't already, you can start tuning into, and I think I talked about this last week or the week before, you can start tuning into what is constant, right? What doesn't change. And then you're starting to tune into the real. So it's not only a wonderful definition, and it's not only fun to see Nisargadatta teach the same thing that came to me from within, but this is a clarity that can be used by all of us to remain clear. So we don't get confused by false truths, things that people say are truths and they're not. So again, truth is permanent. The real is changeless. What changes is not real. What is real does not change. It's like saying the same thing 4 times, right? Saying the same thing 4 times. So let's go look at 292 and Out of the Stillness. We're looking at how I contemplated this once upon a time. And this is what I wrote. Ongoing isness is. And so there is no problem. Moving. I can hear me, George. I'm starting to have fun now. Listen, wait, George, just stay, don't do anything. You ready? I'm just doing this to play. La, 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 la. Oh, I didn't hear that one. Did you turn it down? I can hear, not really hear me clearly, but I can hear like a little sound, like a second after I say something, right? George is downstairs from me. Okay, here we go. Yeah, see, I can hear that. Ongoing isness is. And so there is no problem. Moving, changing, material perception is illusion written over isness without affecting the foundation of reality. Therefore, I love this sentence, therefore, it can come and go, move and change, and perfection remains as it is. Let's listen to that again, because this is really important. It's especially important for those of us who still suffer, right? Ongoing isness is. And so there is no problem. Moving, changing, material perception is illusion written over isness without affecting the foundation of reality. Therefore, it can come and go, move and change, and perfection remains as it is. Now, what's important about that? I mean, how many of us have thought in order for awakening to be, or in order for enlightenment to be, there are certain energies or certain experiences that need to die or end, right? What this says is, because all of that is written over the isness, all of that can, it's allowed to, it's permitted. All of that can come and go. All of that can move and change. And perfection remains as it is. You know, we're back to the discussion of the movie screen and the film, right? The film does not have to be a certain film for the movie screen to be the clear emptiness that it is, right? Our job is simply to continue to focus on that clear emptiness, focus on that clear emptiness, focus on that clear emptiness, until at a subconscious level, not an intellectual level, we're identified with that instead of what's going on. All right, Lynn, go ahead.
So would you say that consciousness is written on awareness in the same way?
Yes, that's exactly what I would say. Yeah. Consciousness is written on awareness. Very good. Very nice clarity. And my whole screen just changed to speaker for some reason. I like to see all y'all, so I had to change it back. So let's just listen to this sentence for a moment, because again, you know, I mean, I was reading a book this morning, and you know, it's a book where a teacher is teaching and students are asking questions, and you know, that same old question came up because the teacher was talking about perfection, and that same old question came up. Well, what about Hitler? You know, it's like the standard question, right? How could Hitler be perfect, right? But let's listen to what this says. Moving, changing material perception is illusion written over isness without affecting the foundation of reality. Therefore, it can come and go, move and change, and perfection remains as it is. And really, I mean, did Hitler come and go? Yeah. And, you know, what's going on in the Ukraine, is that going to come and go at some point? Yeah, right. I mean, this is what we really have to tune into. I mean, some of this stuff can certainly seem extremely difficult while it's here. The point is, someday it's not going to be here. And instead of being all caught up in the current film, we want to pay more attention to the screen. We want to pay more attention to the changelessness. The perfection doesn't lie in the film. The perfection lies in the changeless nature. And what happens is our identity, at least even begins to shift to the changeless nature. The way that I experience that, and I think probably the way that nearly everyone experiences it, but how would I know that? The way you start to experience that shift is occurring is by what I call causeless happiness, right? Even when something is going on that you know once upon a time you would not have been happy, right? I mean, you know the old you, right? For some reason, even though you're dealing with it and you're managing it, this happiness is just here. That's what's happening at that level, is that the subconscious identity with the film and with the character in the film, the person, is shifting to this eternal nature. And the eternal nature isn't concerned about what's going on. So even though you're able to continue to handle the situation in whatever way you need to handle the situation, or maybe it's not your job, and you know, it's not my job to stop the Ukraine war, right? So I don't need to handle that. You're able to allow everything, whether your body is involved or not, you're able to allow everything to be, and you're able to play whatever part you got to play. And this unexplainable happiness is there anyway. You can't tell people why you're happy even with this happening. Because they won't understand. Because they still think you can only be happy when the film is playing out in a certain way. And again, one thing that's really important to understand is this isn't an intellectual change. And what that means is your mind can't make the decision to be okay with things, which I think is another mistake that we make. And then we blame ourselves, right? Because we didn't be okay with this, right? This change happens at the subconscious level. It happens out of sight, but you do start to experience these symptoms like this causeless happiness. How does this change occur? By focusing to whatever degree you can on the changeless nature, by playing the games, right? That I've left on YouTube and that Sean and her friends are playing, by focusing on awareness, watching awareness meditation, by checking in multiple times. What is constant? What's always here? I've told you all before that one of my favorite games started when I had hot flashes, was noticing the change in the body, but paying attention to what's constant. And then I started playing it with, hungry and full and tired and alert and cold and warm. And, as things seem to change, what isn't changing? And just to whatever degree you can, you tune into that. And by just tuning into it to as much as possible, somehow this subconscious shift begins to occur. So again, 292 in the journal says, ongoing isness is. And so there is no problem. Now, again, there is no problem is literally talking from the point of view of the isness. This doesn't mean that as a person, you don't have to deal with stuff, which is where, again, people get confused. If my plumbing sprung a leak right now, I'd probably be, George, get up here, help me figure out how to turn the water off. And then, we got to call a plumber. I mean, I'd be dealing with all of that, right? I'm not going to sit here and do nothing. But what's different now than once upon a time is the unexplained happiness that would be there even while I'm doing all that. You see? So there, at the human level, there's still stuff you got to deal with. And as far as I know, that's going to be true until you die, right? But from the perspective of the changeless nature, there is no problem. That's just a film playing on the screen, and the screen is completely content. And you're starting to experience the contentness of the screen. So ongoing isness is. And so there is no problem. Moving, changing, material perception is illusion written over isness without affecting the foundation of reality. Therefore, it can come and go, move and change, and perfection remains as it is. The story does not have to go a certain way. And as long as you think the story has to go a certain way, you're still identified with the story character. That's what that is. So you really have symptoms here that you can tell you where your identity is, right? To the degree that your identity was with things have to be a certain way in form for me to be happy, that's to the degree that you're identified with the character. To the degree that there's just this happiness, no matter what happens, that's to the degree that you're identified with the changeless nature. And, some people talk about how this shift occurs very suddenly. I can tell you that hasn't been my experience. And I know others have my experience as well. I think I even heard Helen Hamilton talk about this. It was much more of a gradual thing. It's like you could see those degrees changing, right? In the beginning, I mostly identified with the character, but then there are some things where that causeless happiness is starting to show up. And then it's like it moved to where the causeless happiness became greater and greater. And the attachment to things being a certain way in the world became more and more meaningless, less and less, right? So let's move on to 293. Nisargadatta says, he who knows the state in which there is neither the world nor the thought of it, he is the supreme teacher. He who knows the state in which there is neither the world nor the thought of it, he is the supreme teacher. Now, Nisargadatta is using the word he here. So I'm guessing, and we'll find out in a moment when we look at my contemplation, I am guessing that once upon a time when I read this quote, I thought he was talking about a person, a body, like if I could find someone and I could ask them, do you see a world? And they're like, what world? That would be a supreme teacher. I don't see that quote this way anymore. The way I see this quote is that I'm going to use meditation as the example, but I don't think meditation is the only way to realize this. That when we are in meditation and we are to the point where we are just absorbed in the awareness and we're not thinking about the world, we're not aware of a world in any way, we're just absorbed in awareness. Those moments, for lack of better word, those moments when we're there, we are in the supreme teacher, and our subconscious is, I'll call it being rewired. I don't think he's talking about a person. I think he's talking about that place. I mean, what word do you use? I'm using words too. He had to use a word, right? So he said he and teacher. But that circumstance where there's emptiness, that in those circumstances, the subconscious is being rewired. So, today I have been listening on the radio to y'all, and I've heard a couple people, maybe even 3 people, mention nature. Nature is actually not an uncommon opportunity to have these experiences. When you are sitting in nature sometimes, just being with the wind blowing and the grass blowing and the insects flying around, and at some point you just sit there and your eyes still see all this stuff. Don't get me wrong, your eyes still see all this stuff, but there's no thought about it anymore, right? You're just being in the being. That's the supreme teacher, right? That's the supreme teacher, not a person, not a body. And again, for some, it could happen in meditation. For some, it could happen in contemplation. For some, it could happen in nature. Peace Pilgrim was pretty clear. For her, it was in nature, right? And like I said, I've heard a few of you mention that today. And, I think this is why we have a retreat house in La Vida instead of somewhere else. I remember when we first started getting the retreat house, we had a number of complaints, not just a few, a number of complaints. People would mention, but it's so hard to get to. I'm like, well, what do you want? A retreat house in Colorado Springs? What do you want? A retreat house in Denver? We're out here, right? Where, we can take you up on a mountain or take you by a lake and let you sit and let your mind empty out and let you be with the supreme teacher, not Regina Akers, not Shauna, not Anne, not Rhoda, not Jacqueline, the supreme teacher, right? That's why we're in La Vida. So again, I'm guessing, we'll look at what I wrote, but I don't think I understood this quote when I read it before. I think I thought it was a person. So he who knows the state in which there is neither the world nor the thought of it, he is the supreme teacher. So let me see what I contemplated once upon a time. So going to Out of the Stillness, number 293. When listening for answers, teaching, or guidance, listen only to wisdom that says, oh no, I wasn't that far off. There is no world. Reality is present, absolute, perfection. So let me read that again. So I wasn't that far, not as far off as I expected myself to be. So number 293. When listening for answers, teaching, or guidance, when listening for answers, teaching, or guidance, listen only to wisdom that says, there is no world. Reality is present, absolute perfection. So let me give you an example of what this means. First of all, this is referring to the inner teacher. So this is not referring to a body. This is clearly referring to the inner teacher when listening within, really, for answers, teaching, or guidance. Listen only to wisdom that says, there is no world. Reality is present, absolute perfection. This is telling us how to distinguish between the ego and clarity. So let's imagine for a moment that I am concerned about money, right? I don't feel like I have enough money. I'm worried about money. I get this idea that maybe guidance can help me figure out what I should do to get money. So I sit down and I write to guidance. I explain my problem. And then I ask, what shall I do? And guidance says, call George, ask George for a loan, right? That's not wisdom. Or if I'm mad at, I'll use Shauna this time because I used George twice. If I'm mad at Shauna, Shauna said something, it's been spinning in my head and I'm, really upset, and I go within and I ask, what am I to do with this? And it says, you go up there and you tell Shauna that, she needs to respect you. And that's not guidance. Because that type of guidance is saying the world is real, you see. That type of guidance is saying, I need to fix something in the world. I need to get money from George, or I need to put Shauna in her place before I can be happy. So it's, you can't take this particular contemplation literal. In other words, sometimes you may hear guidance say, there is no world, right? But it's more, again, it's more a way of looking at how is guidance helping me deal with my problem. So if I go in and I have a fear of money, and I go in and I ask guidance, what am I to do? And guidance talks about realizing that all of these fears about money are just thought. Notice the stories that are being told about what's going to happen. Notice that none of that is happening now. Notice it's just thought, right? Notice all I'm doing is sitting here in a chair, listening to thought and being scared. Trust that I do not know, right? Learn to rest, accept, and trust with these feelings. Don't take any actions based on these thoughts. Do you know what that's telling me? It's telling me there is no world. It didn't use those words. But you notice how none of the solutions had anything to do with changing anything in the world. They had everything to do with changing my focus, my way of being. So the supreme teacher, the one within us, the one that gives the guidance, is the teacher that speaks from, there is no world, reality is present, absolute perfection. That's its point of view. And all it's helping me to do is let go of everything I wrote on top of that. So just like a while ago, we saw that, we can easily determine between real and unreal if we remember that real is changeless. We can easily determine between ego and wisdom if we remember that wisdom is always coming from the perspective that the world is not real. And ego is always coming from the perspective that the world is, and you have something out there you better fix. That makes it so easy to tell the difference. You'll never be confused again about whether you're writing with ego or inner wisdom if you just look, which one is telling me I have to change something in the world? Right? Which one is telling me I need the movie to be a certain way in order for me to be at peace, or in order for me to be loved, or in order for me to be worthy, or whatever. And which one isn't asking me to change anything in the world? It's just helping me look at what I've written on top of perfection and helping me in whatever way is appropriate for me right now to let that go. So when listening for answers, teaching, or guidance, listen only to wisdom that says, there is no world. Reality is present, absolute perfection. Right now, even while you're fearful about money, or right now, even while you're mad at your friend, everything's perfect. Nothing's out of whack. I love that. It says that in NTI Jude. Nothing is out of whack. Nothing is out of whack, right? You just need to go look in here at what you're writing on top of this, because that's where your suffering is coming from. You know, even though I heard inner wisdom clearly from a very early time as a spiritual student, it took me longer to fully trust it. It's like I had to convince myself to trust what I was hearing from within. Probably some of you had to go through that too, right? And I remember when inner wisdom was teaching me to let go of fear. And I didn't know it, but I was afraid to let go of fear because subconsciously, I believe fear kept me safe. I didn't know that yet. I came to see that later. But I'm not going to let go of the thing that's keeping me safe, right? That's crazy. So I was afraid to let go of fear because I thought fear was keeping me safe. So inner wisdom was talking to me about how all of my thoughts, and by the way, this was, I don't know, this was in 2004, I think. So 2001, when the Twin Towers had gone down, the terrorist attack on the Twin Towers was in the recent past. So, it was only 3 years before. So I could easily remember everything that was going on then and all the fear I was going through. And what had happened during that time was I happened to have just bought a really expensive house, at least in my imagination, a really expensive house, only because all the houses in that town were really expensive, not because I was trying to get a nice house. It was just the best I could do in that town. So I just bought this really expensive house, and I was packing and getting ready to move on the day when this happened, when the planes hit the Twin Towers. And then shortly after that, remember, somebody received anthrax in the mail. And I don't know if you remember, but people were talking about our economy collapsing. People were talking about, you need to go out and buy this really thick plastic and put it on your windows with tape around it. I don't remember how that was supposed to save us from the anthrax, but it's, everybody's doing that. I mean, it was a really fearful time, kind of like when COVID hit. It was another really fearful time for everybody, right? So what Spirit had me do 3 years later, when it's teaching me to let go of fear, and I could still clearly remember, now I can only remember some things, but it had me write down everything that I thought was going to happen in that period of my life when I'm moving to this really expensive house and the whole world is falling apart, right? Write down every single fear. So I did, because I could remember them more clearly then. Every story that was going on that I thought was going to happen, I wrote down. And then Spirit asked me to look at my list. How many of those things happened? Guess how many of those things happened? 0. And then Spirit's like, now do you believe that your mind is just imagination? Right? Now do you believe that all you're doing is listening to imagination and getting scared? And, and that was pretty hard to deny, because Spirit had just proved it to me. All these things I thought was going to happen, all the ways this disaster was going to affect me, not one of them came true. Right? And that doesn't mean things don't sometimes happen. I mean, there were people who lost family members that day. So, but I mean, how many of them do you think were afraid of that morning before it happened? They weren't sitting around thinking about it, were they? They had no idea. So the mind didn't warn them. The mind didn't protect them. The mind didn't say, hey, there's going to be airplanes crashing at Twin Towers. Call your relative and tell them to leave. Right? They were probably afraid of something else, worried about something else that morning. So the idea that the mind, that fear protects us, is simply not true. And this is what Spirit wanted me to see. So again, Spirit wasn't telling me, go buy that plastic, tape it up on your windows, get a roommate because the economy is going to collapse and you won't be able to afford this mortgage on your own. Right? It wasn't talking to me like the world is real. It was talking to me like the world isn't real. Right? It was showing me that I was just sitting there imagining stuff and being scared. So let's move on to 295. Now tell me how many of y'all does this sound familiar to when you hear it? Not because you've heard Nisargadatta say it, because you heard it somewhere else. Are you ready? Not the exact same words, but very close. And this is Nisargadatta, but tell me if this sounds familiar. The real does not die. The unreal never lived. What does that sound like? Isn't that the opening to A Course in Miracles? Yeah. Sina wrote in ACIM. I also love stuff like this, just like I love, the confirmation of things that I learn from within when I see them coming from another teacher. I also love, how many of y'all think Nisargadatta studied A Course in Miracles? No. So what we can see is this is a part of how, when our mind starts doubting this is truth, this is a part of how we can see, no, it is truth. Because, we see it coming from Nisargadatta. We see it coming from A Course in Miracles. We see it coming from Angelo DeLillo. We see it, all these people who maybe never knew anything about each other. And yet when they go within, they come to the same clarity. There has to be a truth here. They're from different times, different cultures, different religions. They didn't study each other. They're not parroting, right? They're seeing. So again, Nisargadatta says, the real does not die. The unreal never lived. The real does not die. The unreal never lived. And this came through Helen Schuckman, which is also really amazing, because Helen Schuckman was a scared person, right? And in fact, she never really fully embraced what she wrote and did her best to disown it towards the end of her life. And yet she was still able to go within, get in touch with this truth, and write it down. Isn't that amazing? It's amazing how the truth gets through. So 295, when I contemplated this years ago, focus on isness puts attention with reality. Attention on reality lacks nothing. It knows no sacrifice. It knows no loss. It knows reality, which is full. I'll read that again. This was my contemplation of the real does not die, the unreal never lived. And remember, again, when we're looking at my journal, it's me talking to me, telling me often how to practice, what I need to do, right? From inner wisdom, but from me. This wasn't a channeling. This was just contemplation. Focus on isness puts attention with reality. Attention on reality lacks nothing. It knows no sacrifice. It knows no loss. It knows reality, which is full. So what Regina is really saying to Regina here is, whenever you think there's lack in your life or lack in yourself, I'm not good enough is really lack in the self, right? Whenever you think there's lack in your life or lack in yourself, you're paying attention to the unreal. Whenever you think there's some kind of a sacrifice, like, oh my God, I have to do this, even that feeling, right? you're paying attention to the unreal. Whenever you think you've lost something, right? Like you lost money in the stock market, you lost your pet, you lost your parent, right? It's saying you're not focused on the real. Now, it's not saying you're bad for that. It's just showing you that in that moment, you are focused on the film. It's saying if you stay focused on the changeless, you're gonna know that peace. People call it peace of mind, but it isn't really peace of mind. It's just peace. It has nothing to do with the mind. It's that causeless happiness. It's that sense of contentness, that sense of all is well. Now, this doesn't mean that if your mother dies, that you're not going to cry. This is where people get confused. What's different is how you're experiencing the crying, right? You can experience the crying from the perspective of this shouldn't have happened, which is a lack, right? A sacrifice, a loss. Or you can experience the crying. How many of y'all have in any way ever experienced mourning, but there was this sweetness in it? Like somehow you knew this was love. Yeah. See, it's different. You know, it doesn't have that this shouldn't have happened in it. It did happen, you know, but somehow you know when you're crying from here that what you did was you genuinely loved. Yeah. Did you want to say something, Melissa?
Yeah, I love that because it's so clear, and especially in that when you lose someone and you realize this too shall pass. There's the difference between the mind being aware of awareness. That's really helpful for me. Thank you, Regina, because awareness knows it's going to pass. It's temporary. So the crying is natural and temporary, and I'm not holding on to it going, why did this happen? It's freedom.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. And in fact, you know, I just before I came in here, I took my dog out to the dog park to potty. And the dog park is by this really nice tree. And so this is the second time this happened as a result of being by a tree. There was a baby bird in the dog park. And once again, my dog got that baby bird in her mouth. This happened, you know, last time or a couple times ago when I was here with a different kind of bird. This was a robin, a baby robin. Fortunately, my dog was very gentle. She was last time too. She didn't actually hurt it. So I told her to put it down. And although she doesn't listen to me when she gets poop in her mouth, and I tell her to put it down, somehow she knows that this live thing, she should listen, right? So she can feel the difference. Like, okay, I got a live thing in my mouth. So she put the bird down, and, you know, and I pulled her back and told her to stay, which she does pretty well. And I went and got the baby bird and took it outside the fence and set it down. The mama bird actually had just gone off to get food for this baby bird. And so it was coming back just as I sat it down. And that mama bird, you know, not realizing what I was doing, that I was saving the bird's life, right? She started screaming at me, right? And so I backed way off to let her know it was okay, and got my dog out of the dog park. And we got back on the porch. I looked and I saw the mama bird go down to the baby bird, right? And probably feed it. But when she was screaming at me, do you think that was mind or nature? It was nature, right? It was nature. And we have nature in us too. So mourning is nature. Yeah, Melissa, I see you have your hand up again.
Well, that's why we don't have to feel guilty. It's all making sense now. Let it come because it's natural. Let it come. And it's like, so when we make a mistake, it's like, okay, we believed, okay, it makes so much sense now. Believed in the unreal. And not because it didn't happen, but because it's going to pass, and let it go. Let go of the guilt. Thank you so much, everybody.
Absolutely. In fact, let me go back, since we've had this discussion, let me go back and read my contemplation of 292 again. Listen to this. Ongoing isness is, And so there is no problem. Moving, changing, material perception is illusion written over isness without affecting the foundation of reality. Therefore, it can come and go, move and change, and perfection remains as it is. So we're not bad for crying when our parents die, as an example. That's nature. Cows cry when they take the calf away, if they take the calf away before the natural time for the calf to leave the mother, right? This is nature. This is what mammals do. Len.
I'm just reminded of something Alan Watts said, stuck in my mind. It's sort of a paraphrase, it's not exact, but he said, a bird that in the winter that's sitting on a branch and freezes to death never felt sorry for itself for one moment. Same thing.
Yeah, well, and Thich Nhat Hanh says something very similar. He talks about a leaf, but as a leaf, changes colors. You know what a leaf changing into a beautiful orange color is? That's old age for a leaf. Exactly what it is. Yet how many of us resist old age, But he says, the leaf doesn't resist the changing colors. It doesn't resist the old age of the leaf, nor does it resist when it falls, which is really the death of the leaf. Right? So all of these things are natural. I mean, I have heard spiritual teachers. I know of one spiritual teacher teaching this stuff right now. That teaches that if you are aging, that your body should not age if you know your oneness with God. And that if you are aging, it is because you are still believing in separation and resisting your oneness with God. That's not true. That's BS. That's like saying the leaves should not turn orange and fall off the tree. Right? This aging process is also natural. What's happening here is we know that the real is changeless. What's happening with this type of teaching is that the teacher is still so attached to the body as what I am, that the teacher is trying to teach the body should be changeless. That's a confusion. The body is not real. We know that because it changes, right? What is real? What is constant? What is here that is definitely I, that never changes? That's what we look for. And then again, as we subconsciously begin to identify with it, we don't mind aging. It's perfectly natural. Here we are. We're beautiful orange and red and yellow flowers or leaves. That's what we are. Some of y'all might not be there yet, but many of us are, right? If you could just look at your wrinkles or your gray hair or whatever you have and just see it as a beautiful fall foliage, right? Because that's what's going on. Yeah. So we're looking at 295 and Out of the Stillness, which says focus on isness puts attention with reality. Focus on isness, not on wrinkles or gray or weight gain. I mean, how many of y'all weigh more than you did in high school? How many of y'all think you could really ever get back to that high school weight? If you did, you'd probably look sick, is what you'd look like. Because it's not natural for 50 or 60 or 60-year-olds to look like they did in high school, right? It's not natural. You hear that word, right? It's not natural. We're not supposed to look that way anymore. Us 60, I'm 63 now, us 63-year-old women, we aren't supposed to be wearing bikinis. Of course, that's just playing with it, but you know what I mean. We're supposed to look the way we look. It's exactly how we're supposed to look. So focus on isness puts attention with reality. Attention on reality lacks nothing. So if I think I'm not beautiful enough, if I think I'm not thin enough, I'm focused on reality or the movie. The movie, right? Attention on reality lacks nothing. It knows no sacrifice. It knows no loss. It knows reality, which is full. And let me say this too, because I love, going after confusion. I just said that if I think I'm not beautiful enough, then I'm focused on the film. Regina does pay attention to what she eats. She does exercise. This is something she does. The difference between when I used to do that once upon a time and the way I do that now, it's a very real difference. Used to, I thought I wasn't good looking enough in whatever way, attractive enough. And I thought I had to improve my attractiveness in order to be acceptable, in order to be loved, in order to be good enough, right? You can hear all the lack in that. Now, I merely do it to maintain the body as well as possible. Completely different. Completely different. So there's nothing wrong with maintaining the body as well as possible, just like there's nothing wrong with maintaining your house, maintaining your car, maintaining my dog's body, right? I try to keep her away from rattlesnakes and stuff. So where the confusion comes in is, and I'm sure everybody has probably felt something like this in one way or another, is if I care about what I eat, if I care, I'm identifying with the body. You don't have to identify with something to care for it. You're the steward of that body. There is no doubt about that. Yes, Melissa.
One more thing. So today in our quotes for Gentle Healing 3, that was the reminder, the clarity in what you just said, keeping the body, and I can't remember the quotes like you guys can, but keeping the body maintained until you realize the self. And
yes,
that's the purpose of maintaining the body versus the desire for attention, acceptance, and all that. Yeah, that was awesome.
Even after you realize the self, you'll probably take care of the body anyway, just because that's what you do. It's just natural. How many of you
that's what the self does.
Yeah, that's what it does. Does anybody think I did something bad by telling my dog to drop the baby bird, picking up the baby bird and putting it outside the fence? Was that bad? Wasn't that protecting a body? So what would be the difference about caring for a baby bird that I'll probably never see again and caring for this body that I live with every day? The ego loves to confuse the spiritual teachings, right? The ego loves to confuse the spiritual teachings. I told Rhoda this in a meeting last week. I said, the practical is just the practical. That's all it is. It's practical to take care of the body. If you don't take care of the body, you will likely suffer in one way or another. Now, taking care of the body is not the same as living up to some ideal about what you imagine a body is supposed to look like. Do you see the difference? If you look out at a crowd of people, do you see bodies that look exactly alike, or are they different? They're different. So where's this ideal body that we think, everyone should have, when it's clear they don't, right? It's clear everybody has different bodies. So all you do is you take the body that you have, the body that you've been given, and you do what is common sense, practical to take care of it, while focusing on awareness. Just like you might clean your house while focusing on awareness, save a baby bird while focusing on awareness, get your oil changed while focusing on awareness, right? Just doing what is to be done while focusing on awareness. And it's the focusing on awareness that shifts the subconscious identification. And I will tell you that whenever you feel guilt about something, like what, I've known spiritual students that feel guilty about going to the doctor. I knew someone who didn't go to the dentist for years because he thought that, if he had a good enough relationship with God, he wouldn't get plaque. And whenever you feel guilty, you're listening to ego. That's not truth. So if it tells you shouldn't take care of the body, you shouldn't go to the doctor, I knew somebody who thought she shouldn't pay bills. That somehow that was a form of control. And, pay attention to this sneaky stuff, because if you really look, you can see ego in ego. Spirit has just told us, moving, changing material perception is illusion, written over isness without affecting the foundation of reality. Therefore, it can come and go, move and change, and perfection remains as it is. It means all this stuff we do as bodies is allowable, every bit of it. Right? Every bit of it. We don't find the truth in it, though. We find the truth in the awareness. And guess what? Is the awareness always there no matter what you're doing with the body? That's what you want to notice. Len, I have 1 minute left. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Is that the same as Nisargadatta's teacher saying to him, keep your attention on the I am
Yes.
as much as you can?
Yes, it is the same. Yeah. So my computer has just told me I have to get in the car and go back to Pueblo West. So I guess that means we're done. Moving and changing locations. So I will not be here next week because I'm going to be on a girls' trip next Wednesday. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I'm going with Danielle and Francine to Woodland Park, Colorado. We're going to be hiking, kayaking, all that kind of stuff. So I won't be here next week, but I will be here the week after. Okay? Bye.